And I'm super excited. For some reason, talking about this particular topic, which I'm about to share with you guys, just makes me super excited. I've had the pleasure of doing this personal inner work in my marriage, with my children, with family members, with so many students and clients. And it makes me really happy because it really unites families and it unites even like I've heard from students saying that they brought their mom, her and her mom together, or it reunited, people that were separated. So this is really, really deep spiritual work that you can do with anyone in your life. And I'm super excited. Let me know that you guys can hear me and see me. Please give this a thumbs up. I didn't know how to title this video. So I kind of like just took a shot with like YouTube's AI. And if you can give it a thumbs up, then more people will see it. Even when you give it a thumbs down, more people see it because YouTube just likes some feedback. So even when people are like, I hate you, it actually helps us. Okay, so the way this training is going to work is I'm going to give you guys a little bit about what I'm about to teach you, what it is, and then how to use it. You have to be really careful on how to use this. And maybe I'll reverse it. Maybe I'll give the how to use it first, just so you guys are really clear that you have to be careful on how to use this. And then we'll do Q&A. I feel like the best of my work comes through when you guys are asking me really expansive questions because I've already been done with this inner work myself and I've been teaching it for many years. And sometimes you need someone asking you an expansive question to be like, oh, I forgot to tell them that part because it's so embodied in me that I don't always think about sharing every bit because it's like my normal, right? So you guys asking me expansive questions reminds me, oh, I didn't teach them that bit. So I appreciate that. Number one, yes, you have heard me talking about how coaching and teaching your partner, your man is super risky. And let me tell you, as someone that's done it the wrong way and then done it the correct way, it is super risky. Okay. So I want you to take this information, let it digest, sit with it, metabolize it, and then use it sparingly as needed. And I'll give you guys some concrete examples of how I used it where it like failed and how I've used it where it worked and how from my own failures and workings I've been able to teach my students and especially my private clients because I have more time with them like exactly how to say things and how to use it. And it has changed thousands of relationships, tens of thousands of just the ones that people reach out and tell me. I'm sure there's relationships that have been transformed from this work where they don't even tell me. So if you use this wisely, it will really help you. Okay. That is my intention, that it helps you, that it serves you. I'm calling it romantic inner work, but really you can use this in any areas. The reason why the romantic part excites me the most is because I tried to use these principles in other areas of my life before I met my husband. But for some reason, I'm sure it was my own shortcomings and my own lack of embodiment. When I tried to use this with my parents or with like extended family members, it worked with my mom somewhat, but it often backfired too. Probably because I wasn't doing it right. But also, I always was put into this energy of like having to defend myself. Irfan, my husband, was the first one where when I started helping him learn these techniques so that it can help our marriage, he never made me feel like I had to defend myself or had to like explain myself. And that's where I really blossomed. So, what I've learned is that if you're doing this from basic babe energy, you are gonna trigger people, okay? People are gonna be mad at you. It's gonna lead to fights. It's gonna lead to misunderstandings. You're gonna feel like you have to defend yourself. It's gonna be a hot mess. I've done it from the basic babe. It does not work. It fails miserably. You're better off not even doing anything. If you do this from the self-aware Barbie, in your romantic relationship, there's going to be an immediate loss of polarity. And we know that polarity is the glue, the magnetic attraction, the sexual energy, the life force of relationships. So if you do this from the basic babe in any relationship, there's going to be arguments, there's going to be triggers, there's going to be fights. If you do this from self-aware Barbie, in your romantic relationship, immediate loss of polarity. In other relationships, maybe with your parents, friends, coworkers, you're gonna be met with resistance. And the feedback you're gonna get is either just repelling energy from them or like, oh, you're a know-it-all, or you think you're better than us. Who has dealt with this? Let me know in the chat if you've accidentally tried to do inner work with people or help them or awaken self-awareness from the basic babe and there's triggers and their fights, or from the self-aware Barbie and they're like, you think you're better than us? You think you're on some high horse? I've had both happen, and it wasn't pretty. So the best way to use this information and teach it subtly, gracefully, with class is going to be from your $1,000,000 babe. And I don't care who you are or where you are in your journey, remember that all of these energies exist within us in a continuum. Trust yourself that with this information that I'm giving you, that you have the ability to use this gracefully, use it tactfully from your $1,000,000 babe. Trust yourself that you have aspects of the $1,000,000 babe inside of you. I promise she's in there somewhere, whether you have owned her, acknowledged her, claimed her, you have that in you. As women, we are just the natural like life givers, right? Like we know how to uplift people with our words. We know how to be graceful. We know how to fill people up with life. So I know that you have that innate ability. You may have forgotten. You have been told otherwise. You have maybe used those other energies. Like for example, with me, when my family and friends before I married Irfan would put me in like defending myself energy, I would first try to defend myself, defend myself, defend myself. Then I learned this one thing that changed my life. I learned that trying to defend yourself to people that are committed to misunderstanding you is such a waste of time and energy. It's actually stupidity. So by the time I came into this marriage with Irfan, 15 and a half years ago, I was kind of already like, I'm not going to defend myself. Like, it was already like, you want to misunderstand me? Misunderstand me. I'm evil. I'm evil. I'm ugly. I guess I'm ugly. I'm stupid. I guess I'm stupid. Like, I had already like exhausted myself with like defending myself. So by the time that I was like kind of trying to infuse this little bit, I was able to do it from this like, this is what I know, this is like blah blah, but like I'm not gonna argue with you. I'm not gonna like negotiate with you, right? And that was so like it was such a $1,000,000 babe kind of embodied energy that it was really working beautifully. So I'll talk more about how to use this and I'll answer questions from you guys. You guys are saying, yes, I've done this. Okay, good. I mean, self-awareness, right? No shame. We've all had basic babe moments. We've all had self-aware Barbie moments. I was actually telling my team in Orange County that I still can't watch like Tony Robbins videos. I still can't watch Gary Vee videos. And they were like, why? I'm like, those guys are amazing. They are so amazing. I can't watch them. Why? Because they will still trigger self-aware Barbie in me. Yes, after all this inner work I've done, after the levels that I've achieved, if I know this because what happened was many years ago, my son, my oldest one, decided that he wanted to work with Tony Robbins. So he bought like some coaching stuff with him. And since they were buying, Irfan was buying these packages for him, Irfan decided that this might be something for them to do together. And I was like, that's a great idea. So for like weeks, we had Arman and Irfan watching Tony Robbins content on the big screen in our living room. So I wasn't like sitting with them and watching it. I was just like walking around my house and I was hearing Tony Robbins. And all of a sudden I found myself saying, do I need to work harder? Do I need to like, yes, I need to like do this. I need to like hustle more. And then I'm like, hold on, Mina, hold on. Tony Robbins is a very masculine energy, amazing coach, and men need him. You are not a man. Settle down now. So we all have aspects that come and go and that can be triggered. So after that experience, I was like, okay, I'm not gonna like I already have too much self-aware Barbie in me from the past. where I have to like protect my energy from certain coaches. They're amazing for men, not for self-aware, like, healed self-aware Barbies like me. So there's no shame in like, okay, we've all had basic babe moments. We've all had self-aware Barbie moments. So what? That's okay, right? Okay. So what am I talking about today? I believe that the thing that unites us the most, and in fact, not that just I believe, this is scientific research. So according to evolutionary science, what they found is that the thing that unites groups, so think of like tribal energy. Think of back in the days when we had these small tribes that we lived and functioned within. They have found that what united us was a common set of values, goals, and language. Language is an important one. And this is what they contribute to us surviving, and some of the other like I can't pronounce this name, Nathaniel, like some of the other like evolved ape groups didn't make it. The reason that Homo sapiens made it is because if you study our history, we're the only ones. Yes, thank you so much for writing that. I cannot say that word to save my freaking life. Some of the other ones, the reason that they died out is because they never evolved to have the ability to share a common language. So that's important, right? Well, what happened when I started doing in-person events is a lot of the feedback that I got was, oh my God, like, yes, we're excited to see you. But the main thing about these in-person events is that I now met other women that speak my language. And it kept coming up. Oh my God, I said container issue and she understood me. Oh my God, I said limiting belief and she understood me. And that's the thing. Well, what if your marriage or your work group, like if you have like a little work group, or your family, like your parents, your friends, what if you guys don't even have a common language? Because I know this happens a lot in like even immigrant families where, your parents maybe came from another culture, another country, and they have a certain language. They have certain things that they believe. And you maybe were raised here in the United States and then you went to school here and now you're doing inner work and you're talking limiting beliefs, self-awareness, couple bubble. And they're like, huh? So there can be this like loss of unity when you don't share a common language. So obviously, like when I got married to Irfan, I was coming from my family background, my traumas, my conditioning, my background, my language, right? Irfan is coming from his family background, his culture, his traumas, his conditioning. And I realized that the first couple of years of our marriage, we spent a lot of time like explaining things. Like for example, when I would get together with my in-laws, they would have all this stuff and then they would have to stop and be like, oh, this is what we're referencing. Like they had all these like inside jokes and like these like phrases. Let me know if you know what I'm talking about. Where like I didn't understand that because I wasn't a part of that unit. So now I understand all of that them because they stopped and they would say, "Oh, when we say this, it's because 20 years ago this thing happened with blah blah blah, and then now that's a running joke." I'm like, "Oh, okay." So there was like this initiation period where we're joining and combining language. Okay. Something interesting happened when we were at my sister-in-law's house in Orange County, where we were all sitting and talking, and I'm so grateful. I feel like I received like millions of dollars worth of like free mentorship from them. They've been business owners for like 3 decades. And when they were asking questions about my business, and Irfan was explaining something, and it was so freaking hilarious to me because he was talking in Urdu, but he kept using the word container. And after about the fifth or sixth time, my sister-in-law interrupted him and she was like, "What's a container?" Oh, I could already see it because he was talking and I didn't want to interrupt him. I didn't want to be rude. So I was just like, oh my God, he keeps using the container word. Like, are they getting this? Right? And so she interrupted him. And then he's like, oh, and then he explained it to them and they got it. And I'm like, Wow, now we share this special language with them too. So what I found in my marriage is that explaining certain things to my husband, certain concepts, gently, over time, has brought us closer together. It's given us a common language. It's helped us create a framework on how to process life. When things happen with family members, in our business, with our children, we know how to filter it properly. Because if you don't know how to like process emotions properly, if you don't know how to process life properly, like ups and down, then life can be this like chaotic mess. So not only have I used these principles that I'm about to share with you in my own marriage, but I have had the pleasure of sharing this with tens of thousands of clients worldwide, and they've been able to successfully use this. This is the first time I'm like openly, publicly doing this free masterclass. You can find all of these concepts in my courses, but I wanted to just, I don't know, I was just called to just do this free masterclass. So I have 5 here that I'm giving you today. There's more, but I'm giving you 5 here that we can really dive in. Please don't hear these 5, run to your partner and be like, you have to learn all of this. They're going to feel overwhelmed. They're going to feel Alina's favorite word, bombarded, right? Alina uses that word all the time. They're going to feel bombarded by you. It's going to be too much. Keep in mind that I have learned these principles over 43 years. So I've had 43 years to learn it, make mistakes, digest it, reevaluate, metabolize it, right? And then like work it out. You listening, if you've been in my world for even like a few months, then you've also had time to digest this information. Some of you guys tell me that when you first found me, you were massively triggered by my work, right? So let's be fair to our partners, whether we're talking about a romantic partner, our children, our mom. Let's be fair and gentle that you can't take something that you have had so much time to integrate and digest and like just bombard them with it, right? Like it'll be too much for them. So I've been using these principles in my marriage for 15 years, and still now, every day, we're like adding stuff to it. We're like reintegrating it. We're like evolving it. It's not going to be perfect right off the bat. I really want you not to feel like, oh, I went and I told my husband all this and now he's triggered or he doesn't get it. Everyone understands and learns things in their own way. I have a couple examples of this, and then I'll share these with you guys. One of my nephews, many years ago, we were having a conversation, and he said, "I hate reading." And you guys know that I don't like hearing that because you guys know I love reading. So I was like, all of a sudden, like I'm like, oh my God, I don't want my nephew not to be reading. And so I paused for a second because I didn't want to answer, like, I didn't want to be like, well, reading is good, right? I didn't want to start coaching him in a way that he's going to be repelled by it even more. I'm sure he's heard all of that. So I paused for a second and I said, what made you come to that conclusion? And he thought about it and he said, well, I hate everything that they assign at school. Like, I just don't enjoy reading. It's like, I do it because I have to. And he was at university at this time. So, you know, he was a little bit older. And he's like, I do it, but it's like, I hate it. So like already I'm like kind of feeling like I just want him to love reading. So I'm like, calm down, Mina. Tactfulness, grace, space. So I said, well, you're really into cars. He's obsessed with cars. And like, have you tried reading something about cars? Again, he thought for a second. He's like, actually, I'm always reading articles about cars, new technology, new features. So I'm like, so you actually love reading? And it was like this light bulb went on. I'm like, I hate sports. If you force me to read books on sports, I would hate reading. But it's not because I hate reading. I actually hate sports. I am not a sports person. That is not my thing. Okay. Everyone that knows me and loves me knows that you go do your sports, don't involve me. Right. So when I said this to him, it was a light bulb moment. And he doesn't hate reading and he doesn't have that identity anymore. So why I'm telling you this is that You have to know that your loved ones, your colleagues, your children, all these people that you want to use this concepts on, they learn in different ways. They have different ways of metabolizing information, and you can learn, by having their human chart read. So Armand does human design readings. You guys know this. His email is in the description box. He can tell you how they metabolize information so that it can be very useful to know. I'll throw it in the chat for you as well. So this was a game changer. I have done everyone's chart in my family, and I know how each of my family members, including myself and my husband, how we metabolize information, how we take in, how we learn. So you have to be self-aware enough to be like, if I bombard my husband with like these woo-woo and spiritual concepts, is this how he receives information? And if the answer is no, I kind of like that, he doesn't, then the next question I want you to ask yourself, well, how can I present this in a way that will be exciting for them? Okay, without forcing it, without like they're allowed to feel how they're allowed to feel, but they might pique their interest. I have such an amazing story about this. So years ago, you guys remember when, what was the show name? I think it was, yeah, Stranger Things. Is that correct? Stranger Things, when it first came out, my boys watched it and my sons, and they loved it. And so when they love something, they want us to watch it with them, and they want to like rewatch it with us. Like that's like a theme with them. So they were like, hey, you guys have to watch Stranger Things. Well, Irfan had already tried to play, like, I think we had tried to watch like an episode and a half. And for some reason, when Irfan had played it for us, before we even knew the boys were watching it, we couldn't get into it. Like, I think Irfan was like, it's like for kids. So I was like, well, yeah, I know you guys like it, but like daddy tried to watch it and he had put it on for us, and daddy thought it was for kids. So I don't think he's going to want to watch that. And the boys were like, no, 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 it's really good. You have to watch it. And we kind of just like forgot about it. My middle son, he's a projector. He knew that he could get me to watch the show. So I don't know how much time passed, but let's just assume a few weeks later. Ayan comes to me, and we're actually like out on a walk. So we're all having like a metaphysical conversation about like physics and the universe. And Ayan goes, "Oh, I learned this new like metaphysical thing from Stranger Things." I'm like, "That show that you and Armand were watching?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "There's metaphysical things in there?" And he's like, "Yeah. There's this one concept that you're gonna love." And then quiet. I'm like, "Tell me, what is it?" Like, don't just stop talking. And he goes, "They have this world, and it's called like the upside down world." And I was like, this walk is done. Let's go home. I have to watch this show. So we come home, and we all binge watch the show. Like, there were like a few seasons at this point, like crazy. And after I binge watched it, I was like, oh my God. Ayan got me to, no, daddy and I tried watching the show and it's for kids and we didn't like it, to like binge watching it like a psychopath up all night. Like at 4 a.m., the boys would be like, we're tired, right? And we're like, let's watch one more episode, right? I'm like, how did he do that? And then I'm like, oh my God, he used everything that I teach on me. And it was genius. If he tried to tell me anything, what if he came to me and he was like, Mom, there's sports in it. You should watch it. Do you think I would have watched that show? He knew how to get me. He like delivered it in like these small pieces where I'm just like, tell me more. Like, what metaphysical stuff in Strangers? Upside down world. I want to watch that now. That's how I want you to move. I want you to have the self-awareness to be like, I want to teach my son about this thing. What does my son like? What kind of things interest him? How can I make this relevant to what he enjoys already learning about? Or how can I phrase this in a way where they're like, oh, this is going to benefit me. Is this making sense to you? Let me know in the chat. Default said, love Alina's word bombardment is so true. It's pointless to go into teaching mode with anyone. Just let yourself be an inspiration for others. That's all. Yes. Yes. LOL. It's like sneaking medicine in food. Yes. Yes. Beautiful. Definitely know what you're talking about, Sophie said. Hi, Olga. Hi, Kristen. Okay, so you guys get it, right? So you're gonna have to be tactful, okay? You have to make it where it's like it's their idea or they're interested in it. Yeah? Number one, we're starting the list now. If someone wants to help us along and put in the chat, I will be very, very grateful. I think some people are visual learners and they like just having a list. Number one, the number one thing that I brought and introduced into my marriage was driving me batshit crazy and insane. And I was like, I have to explain this because I was like, I get it, but Irfan doesn't get this. How can I explain it to him so he can have some self-awareness around this? And it was the idea of perception. So because I was doing solo inner work and this is my world, I'm always in it, I was aware that two people can have a completely different experience about the same thing. Okay. I've actually talked to siblings where it's almost like they had a completely different childhood with a completely different set of parents. And you're like, were you guys raised in the same household? They were. But remember that the mind is a projector, it is not a camera. So even though, maybe four siblings had the exact same household, exact same parents, exact same child, parenting, they all perceived it differently. Maybe child A thought that they were unfairly judged or they had to do a bulk of the chores and they felt victimized in their family. And maybe child B thought they lived in a fantastic, happy household where everything was like just jolly and brilliant, right? And maybe child C was a little bit more neutral and they're like, some things were great, but my parents are human and some things were not so great. Do you see where this is going, right? So what I was wanting to bring into my marriage, consciousness, is that we can both be correct at the same time. You can be totally in your logic and your rational and have experienced something in one way. And I could be totally in my emotions about something. And my perception of that exact event might be completely different. And that's okay. And of course, when we would be arguing and I would try to bring that, it would not land. It would just trigger us even more. And I already had a rule that I'm not going to defend myself. So like I would just shut down. Then I would be like, okay, I guess I'm wrong. Like I'll just shut down, right? It just wasn't getting along. Then should I do the how as I'm going along? What would be more useful? Um, mm, mm, mm. Is it more useful if I just give it to you like how I brought that in right away, or like give you all of them and then come back to it? Let me know what would be more useful. Oh, Sophia, I appreciate you putting that down. Okay. Okay. Give the how right away. Okay. Thank you, Christian. Thank you, AK. Love that. Okay. So what happened was, as I was already dealing with this in my marriage early on, you guys know the first like 18 months of my marriage, my husband and I were just triggering each other a lot, like a lot. we were trying to work some stuff out. So what happened was there was a dispute in our friend circle that had nothing to do with us. And we heard about the situation from the one friend who gave us their side of the story. And then we heard of the entire thing from the other friend in a different incident, like a different moment, and they gave us their side. And then we also heard what some of our other friends felt about the whole thing and who they thought was at fault. So that was my moment. Can you guys already see where this is going? So when we were discussing this, Irfan and I, because this was non-triggering for us, because it didn't involve us, right? It's easier to talk about someone else because it's not us. So I was like, well, from the one hand, I understand what this person is saying. Like from their perspective, ding, 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 ding. From their perspective, what they're saying makes sense. I could see why they were triggered in this moment. I could see why they felt like they were mistreated. But on the other hand, from this person's perspective, I also see their side, right? What do you think? Like, what do you think is going on? And that was it. Irfan's like, well, yeah, from their side, I would be very upset in their situation. I'm like, me too, me too. He's like, but I could see why they would have felt disrespected, because it happened in their house. I'm like, yeah, me too. So because I was raised being told by my dad that he wanted me to be an attorney, you guys know that story, right? His dad wanted him to be an attorney. He couldn't do it, came here instead, wanted me to do it. I was already kind of groomed, at least in my own perception of like, oh, maybe I need to be an attorney. I need to be able to argue both sides. I need to be able to see things from multiple angles. And because of my own education, I had this ability. But when I would be in a heated situation with my husband, even if I could understand that, I couldn't explain it in a way that landed on him. It was just too triggering. He would say, "You're saying I'm lying?" Like, no, I'm not saying you're lying. I'm just saying we could both be correct at the same time. But because he didn't know that as a reality, it wasn't something that was a part of our vocabulary. It wasn't something that we had openly discussed. Can you see why it would be very triggering? So bringing someone else's story and saying, I see both sides, then that wasn't the end of it. After that, for months, anytime I would be watching a TV show with my husband, or someone would share something, I would say, I could kind of see both sides from their vantage point, perception. I'm introducing words that I was taught at school, and I've learned in my journey that he has a master's in engineering, right? I'm not sure if they gave that same information. Like, he's a brilliant guy, but he's not studying communications and anthropology. Like, you know what I mean? It's his stuff is presented in a different way. He does the same thing to me. He's taught me so much about like physics and maths and engineering, things that I was not taught in school because I didn't take those subjects. And so he brings things to me in a way that I will understand. So that brought in this awareness. And what it did for our marriage is that anytime we had a disagreement, I noticed this in him right away, actually, is that he would say, from my perception, that word did not even exist in his vocabulary. It didn't exist in his vocabulary. So when he started saying, well, from my perception, I'm like, oh my God, yes, right? And so then it was easy for me to be like, well, I'm sorry that from your perception, you felt that way. Because now it's like we're now acknowledging that there are two perceptions and we're not making any one of them wrong. And what I noticed is that a simple disagreement was resolved in like a few minutes of conversation versus before this conversation, it would be like a simple disagreement would turn into a full-blown argument, would turn into a full-blown fight, and then we're not like talking for half the day. And it's like, hey, like what happened to like this little thing turned into this big thing, right? So that is something I want you guys to start throwing in here and there. And you do this like subconsciously, really, like sublime. So if you start saying things in conversation with your mom, with your sister, with your dad, with your partner, with your child, saying, well, from my perspective, this is what I experienced. What did you see? Or what did you feel? Already, you are very much introducing this thing of like, oh, there's two viewpoints. And we're not necessarily making any one of them wrong. There's space for all of us to have our opinions. And remember, one of the key things that I've taught you guys in my relationship courses is the concept of meta updating. You cannot meta update your partner or anyone for that matter when you're arguing, because one of the key principles of meta updating is that you both respect each other and see each other as a valuable resource and a respectable person and an intelligent person. It's like the key principle of that like meta updating principle. So it's part of the Bayesian model, by the way. I didn't invent that. My husband introduced it to me, and then I started using it in my marriage, and we started teaching it. So it's an actual like principle that exists. And I love it. It's been such a game changer because it's so much easier to meet in the middle, to meta update, to be on the same page. And when I say meet in the middle, I don't mean it in the sense of like someone has to give up their position. It's just like where you started off on opposite poles, but you end up agreeing, right? Like win, 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 if that makes sense. Okay. So let me, should I take, let's save the questions until the end. Thank you for the super chat, Shama. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna share these principles and then I'll come back and answer some of the questions that are more general. I always tell him two things can be true at the same time. Exactly, exactly. There is this beautiful saying, I don't know if I read this or heard this somewhere like decades ago, and it was like shocking and just kind of like, ooh. And basically the concept was that if 10,000 people have laid eyes on you, then that means that there's 10,000 versions of you. Because every single person that has crossed your path, smiled at you, interacted with you as a cashier, was in a relationship with you, any sort of interaction with you has formed in their mental model, mental image, a perception of you. It does not matter if that perception is true or not. It's their perception. Okay? They might have all kinds of opinions about how you look, how you move, how you dress, how you speak, whatever you do. None of it is true for you, or maybe some of it is, but it's true for them. That's how they perceive you. So that has nothing to do with how you actually are. So these are all concepts that have really helped me on this journey. And but my limiting belief, my story was, well, I know this, but he doesn't. So being able to gracefully, without like saying like I'm your coach and I'm teaching you, and then there's loss of polarity. I've made those mistakes too, by the way. I was able to slowly introduce these levels into our everyday conversations. Okay. So that was number one. Thank you, Sophie, for sharing that. Um, okay. So I'll take some of these general questions later. I see you guys. I'll definitely try to answer as many as I can. I just don't want to get so sidetracked that we don't get through the training. Number two, the concept of limiting beliefs. That was a big one. So one of the things that, we know with just the natural differences between men and women, and then also on top of it, the differences between masculine and feminine, and then on top of it, just the natural differences of just being two individual people with different conditioning, is that people come in to marriage and any interaction with their own set of beliefs. And I've said this before and I'll say it again. All beliefs are essentially limiting beliefs. Some beliefs are just more expansive. So for example, to me, $100 to spend on something and saying that I can only spend $100 on this might be my limiting belief. But someone who only spends $50 on that thing might be like, oh, that's expensive. Wow, you're willing to spend 100 on that? So 50 is a limiting belief for someone. 100 is a limiting belief on someone. A third person might show up and be like, oh, I don't buy anything under $1,000 in that thing. Like, oh, right? Wow, right? So everything is essentially a limiting belief for someone and expansive for someone. So we just have to be willing to look at our own current limiting beliefs and say, is this really serving me? It may have served me before, but is this serving me now? Like, is this really taking me to my next level? Is this really enhancing my marriage, my quality of life, my parenting, my relationships, and then pushing them? So what would happen in our marriage is that I was like consciously doing it at work. And I was like bursting through limiting beliefs. And I would say, wow, like, let's do this. Or I would have an idea, or I would want to like spend money on something. And my husband's like, no, 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 we can't do that, because if we do this, then this will happen, this will happen. And I would recognize what he's saying as limiting beliefs. But like, if I said that to him, he's not going to understand that, right? Because it's like, what are you saying? My beliefs are limited? Like, it's not something that a man from his culture, his background, his education openly uses. So I had to find other examples, not triggering examples saying like, you have a limiting belief and I'm better than you and I'm more expanded and I've done more inner work. That would not have worked. I've tried that in the past. It did not work. So I had to find examples on TV. Maybe we're watching a show together. Maybe our kid said something. Maybe a friend said something. Be like, well, that's interesting. This person, does this and feels this, but that person over there, like, interesting. Like, could that be a limiting belief, right? And when I started kind of like saying things like that, I'm now introducing a new concept into our vocabulary, into our world. And I know this training is sounding like I'm the smart genius that like taught my husband something. It's not like that. Like 99% of the time that I even share anything on like I learned this from my husband. So it worked both ways, but of course I'm doing this training, so I'm just sharing my stuff. But there's been millions of things that my husband taught me that I had no idea existed. And I was like, oh my God, that's mind blowing. That's why I'm always telling you guys that. So just want to make that clear. It's not like I'm some genius and I just cracked the code. So I started talking about limiting beliefs. And then my older son, who was little at the time, he was like, Mom, what's the limiting belief? So I was like, oh my God, thank you for this opportunity. So I was like, well, a limiting belief is when we have like this arbitrary line that we've created a story around, that if I do this, that XYZ will happen. But there's like millions of people on the planet that are doing that thing because they don't have that story. And he was like, wow, so can you give me examples? I was like, yeah. So I started giving my son examples of his friends or even examples of my own life where I used to think if I do this, it's so dangerous. And then I like did it. And then now it's like we do it all the time and it's not. He's like, oh, so that was your limiting belief? I'm like, yeah, that was my limiting belief that if I do this, bad things will happen. So as I'm telling my son this, Irfan's listening. And after that, this was the funniest thing. Oh my God. Like a week later, I hear my husband on the phone with his best friend talking. I can't hear his best friend, but I can hear my husband. And he's like, no, man, that's such a limiting belief. Like that's a limiting belief. Like, you can't think like that. And I'm like, oh my God, it sinked in, right? And like, oh my God, there's a beautiful butterfly right outside my window. Sorry, I just get so distracted with all this beauty around me. Okay. So I was like, oh, it's sinking in. It's a part of my vocabulary. Well, now, that was like 13 whatever years ago. Now I hear my husband using limiting beliefs all the time in everyday communication. In fact, it's safe in our family to be like, I think I'm having a limiting belief. I think you're having a limiting belief. Well, if I said this early on when we hadn't done this inner work, people would have felt attacked. Okay. We would have triggered each other. Now, with the robust family and relationship that we have, it is perfectly acceptable to be like, I think that's a limiting belief, babe, or I think I'm having a limiting belief, because it's a part of our everyday culture in our family to believe those things. Okay. Thank you, Miss. I don't even want to read that out loud because I don't want it to sound like I'm saying I'm a genius, but this is what I studied. And so it's my background. And Irfan has taught me a million things as well. But we have mastered the art of sharing things in a way that the other person will understand and not be triggered. Because in the first 18 months of our marriage, we were triggering each other so much. Both of us were like walking on eggshells. In fact, I was so pissed when one day we were having an argument. My husband was like, I feel like I'm walking on eggshells. I'm like, I'm walking on eggshells all the time. And I was like, wait a minute, we're both feeling like that, right? So because we've gone through that, we had to learn how to be able to communicate in a way that wasn't triggering. And then when we passed that, then we got to a point where we're like, we have a marriage where we can say anything and the other person never questions each other's judgment. So the concept of having a robust marriage was something Irfan introduced to me. And he was like, I learned something in engineering school. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh God, this is gonna, there's a reason I didn't go to engineering school. Do I really want to hear this, right? But he's like, I'm going to explain it to you in a robust. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, I want to have a robust marriage. And I'm like, okay. And then I asked him, I said, well, what does that mean? He's like, well, let me explain the engineering concept and then you'll know what this means. I said, okay. So he said, in engineering, if someone comes to us and they hire us for a project and they say that we're building a 200 floor building. This is the exact example that Irfan gave me, and I don't know any other one, so I'll just share this with you guys. And they hire us, and we try to make a building that's 200 floors, and we realize that that building is not robust. It's shaky. So I'm like, well, what would make a building shaky? He's like, let's say that the winds at 200 floors up are so like turbulent, I think is the word that he used, that that building can fall if there is a storm, or that birds will like fly into it, or a plane might hit it. Like he was giving me all these examples. So he said, we can build, we would tell the client we could build a 200 floor building, but it's not going to be robust. So then the client might say, well, what's the most robust building that we can build? And he's like, we would calculate stuff and we could say, you know what? We could give you a building that's 175 floors up because it's robust. You can do that safely. And I'm like, okay, all right. So how does this apply to relationships? And he's like, let's say that there's a couple and they have the steamy, like romantic, like rip your clothes off marriage. I'm like, okay, this is already sounding really juicy, right? This is a conversation we had like more than a decade ago, right? I'm like, that sounds amazing. Sign me up. He's like, however, I'm like, oh shit, there's a however. He's like, however, if the woman is like having lunch with her girlfriends, and by the way, evolutionary science, we know this, women are very agreeable and we're very easily influenced. This is something that's very taboo to say in American culture, but this is very much understood in my culture and we work around it. So let's say that she's having lunch with her friends, and even though she has this hot, steamy relationship, her friend puts some doubt in her mind and says, well, your husband, he's not that great. I just saw him checking out that other girl. Or I heard this thing about your husband. Because the way that women have evolved, especially like basic babe stage, she's going to be like going home and be like, I heard this about you and I can't trust you and blah, 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 blah. He's like, that's not a robust marriage. And I was like, oh my God, I'm loving the way this is sounding. He's like, a robust marriage is where things are consistent. The husband and wife have an understanding. They might have moments of hot steaminess. They might have moments where they're busy raising the kids and doing household things, but no one can come in between them. No one can like whisper in the woman's ear or whisper in the man's ear and all of a sudden the marriage is in shambles. They're not doing this. And I was like, yes. So that's what you mean when you say robust? He's like, yes. And then he asked me, he's like, what do you hear? I'm like, I thought robust was like everything's just like here all the time. He's like, that would be like that 200-foot building that we just build the best thing possible, but like a wind can blow it down. A rumor might break the whole thing down. Someone like whispering in your ear might be like, oh my God, I can't trust my husband now. He's like, something robust is where we're always on the right team. Even if we have a moment where a parent is ill or you're busy with the kids and maybe we were supposed to have, intimate time on Friday and we didn't. The whole thing isn't going to break apart because life happened. And I'm like, please sign me up for that. That's what we want. So this was like a couple of years into our marriage that we were having this conversation. So our goal has been consistently to build a robust marriage and get more and more robust. So every year, with the blessings of God and with all of the inner work that my husband and I put in, we have been becoming more and more robust. Okay. So that's what I want you to have. That's what you get to have. I don't want you to have like an 18-month fling where he's providing and he's giving you everything and he's saying all the right things, but like one little thing happens and the whole building crumbles. Like it, right? Using my husband's expertise in engineering, we need something that's safe on the foundation, safe in the middle, and safe on the top floor. It's robust. So this is what these things that I'm teaching you has will help you do. Now, are you noticing a theme? All of these things require the long game. I did not go to Irfan or he didn't come to me. Like even 13 years ago, like 2 years into our marriage when we had that conversation, it was years before we started saying, oh my God, this marriage is robust. Things happen in the middle and we'd be good. And then we've had family members try to cause divorces in our marriage. We've had, you guys would not even believe the stuff that we've had to go through. We've had, Irfan and I often say that together we buried 3 parents. We've dealt with financial stuff. We've dealt with like so much things in our work, health issues. I was diagnosed with RA through this marriage. We've dealt with like pregnancy complications. So life happened. And even after we were aware of this robust concept, even after we had that conversation, things would happen, we would be good. And then something would happen. And then Irfan would say, I don't feel like our marriage is robust. He's like, I don't feel like we are robust. And I would be like, I don't feel robust either. Like, fix it, do something. And so then we would do inner work together. We would do individual inner work and together inner work. So this stuff is really playing the long game. And I know some people get really mad at me. I've had clients get upset in the past and like leave my container saying, she's saying this is gonna take time. I wish there was a magic pill. I would be a gazillionaire if I could bottle all this up, put it in a magic pill and say, just take this. Just give me $1 million and take this and everything will be solved. But if I'm just being honest, right? I'm in this journey of life for 43 years. I'm going to be 44 later this year. I'm still doing my inner work. I am. I have coaches and mentors. I read books. I take courses. I journal. I meditate. I work out. I have to have difficult conversations with family members and team members and family, extended family and friends. Like, I'm in it. Like, at no point I'm like, well, we got to just burn this whole shit down. Like, I understand that people have different perceptions. Relationships take time to build robust. And one thing that I've learned, and I had this issue, is that I learned this about myself when I came into this marriage, that I had like 1 foot in, 1 foot out. I was like looking for like something to go bad so I could be like, okay, that's it, I'm out. But that's not going to make a robust relationships. Like even when we decided that we wanted a robust relationship 13 years ago, we didn't have one for many years after that. Unfortunately, because it took time. Your decision wasn't enough. My decision wasn't enough. I still had inner work to do. So number 1 was perception. Number 2 was limiting beliefs. Number 3, container issues. You have to gently and gracefully start introducing the concept of container issue. So this is going to sound funny, and I hope this is not going to sound weird. Someone probably is going to take this the wrong way, and whatever. I'm just going to share it. This is going to sound so weird, but I'm sharing it. I was sharing this with my best friend. So we were having a conversation some time ago, and she used one of my, she doesn't like follow my work or anything. You know, she's aware of what I do, but she's not like watching my videos or anything like that. So she used the concept from when my book first came out. And I was like, you know about that? And she was like, duh. She's like, you told me that like the first month that we met. And I'm like, oh, I did? She's like, yeah. She's like, I don't know if you realize this, but she's like, you have like these certain things that everyone in your world almost has to know to get along with you, to like understand you. And I was like, what do you mean? Like it almost sounded a little triggering, right? She's like, well, it's like you have your own language. It's like you have your own little world. She's like, if I don't understand what you mean by a container issue, or what you mean by the word desi, or like the word sukoon, even though she doesn't speak my language, she's like, I feel like I can't even understand anything you're saying. And I was like, oh my God. It's like, it's like I come with like this rule book of like, if you're gonna be in my world, it would be very useful if you understood these concepts. And it sounds kind of weird because it's like, it's not that I'm enforcing this on other people, but I just thought it was funny the way she explained it. And so container issue is definitely one of those things. You want to make sure that you understand what a container issue is. And you guys know I have an entire course on this. I just recently did a recorded video on this. You understand it, people around you understand it, and also there's no shame around it. So I was having this meeting with one of my team members the other day, and I felt like this person was like dancing around saying something that I already understood. And so they were kind of like trying to avoid this phrase, and I was just like, just say it, I'm having a container issue. I'm like, I know I'm having a container issue, but you avoiding saying that makes me feel like there's like shame around it. I'm like, I have no shame in having a container issue. It means I'm going to the next level. I'm like, admit it, I'm having a container issue. I know that, and you know that. And he goes, yes. Right? So, um, I want it to be okay in your life to be having a container issue. It's normal. If you are anything like me and you want to continuously expand into the best version of yourself, if you want to get closer to God, if you want to have more abundance, if you want to be in your dream body, if you want to be in a soulmate, robust relationship, if you want to parent your kids in the best high vibe way possible, you're going to keep expanding, which means by definition, you're going to have container issues. So I don't want you to be like, I'm having a container issue. I can't let anyone find out. No, there's nothing shameful about that. You have seen me in the last 13 years openly admit all of the container issues I've had, and I continuously have. Because in fact, if I stopped having container issues, stop following me. Because that means I stopped growing. That means that I've capped out on my own growth, and I've capped out on where I can take you. Like if I'm like not doing anything different, if I'm not expanding, if I'm not growing, if my lifestyle isn't changing, if my looks aren't changing, if the level at what I'm teaching isn't changing, I'm probably not a good teacher for you because I'm stagnant. And we know that anything stagnant becomes diseased. What happens to still water? Stagnant, it's diseased. It's dirty water now. So world life requires flow. It requires circulation. Your marriage requires this. Part of the reason that marriages are so hot and heavy in the beginning is because there's a lot of first in the beginning. There's like our first date and our first car ride and our first trip and our first trip to his parents' house and our first ski trip and our first blah, blah, blah. Well, when you've already been married for 2 or 3 years, we become stagnant. We stop doing firsts. And so expanding, learning, growing, doing new things, expanding our container, and therefore having container issues is what's going to keep your relationship juicy. It's what is going to put life and soul into your union. It's what's going to keep the excitement going. Okay? So this one time I was joking with my husband. I was it was like right when my business has started, and it was like hit the ground running and all this stuff was happening super fast. And I was like, I'm sorry, were you expecting like a very like normal, basic, like quiet life? Because this is what you get. And he's like, actually, this is more fun. He's like, your work, your life, like supporting you gives my life meaning. So now if I become stagnant, like I'm taking that away from him. So my growth, my container issues, like my limiting beliefs, my expansion, like expands my husband. His expansion expands me. It what keeps our marriage and our union like oiled up. You know what I mean? Like it's like good. It's juicy. That's what I want for you. Okay, that's what you get to have. I love it when you guys are like, oh my God, Mina, because of your work, my relationship with God has improved. Because of your work, I'm attending church now. Because of your work, I finally get along with my dad or my mom, or I understand my husband more, or I'm parenting in this way. Three women came up to me at the Orange County Intensive. One announced it publicly, two separately, privately to me. So three women total came up and said, Mina, I'm pregnant and it's because of you. I'm like, I'm pretty sure I didn't get you pregnant. They're like, you are the one that made me desire children. Society had told me raising children is hard, that raising children, it requires suffering, that I'm going to have to sacrifice myself and my marriage or my own like goals and achievements, my life to have babies. Seeing you parent the way that you parent made me realize I want to be a mom, and now I'm pregnant. And I'm like, ah, that is inner work. That is you owning your desires. That is you doing something new. That is you evolving, right? That's you saying, yes, in the past, society told me that being a mom or being a wife is miserable and it requires suffering. But Mina doesn't believe that. And if Mina doesn't believe that, that means that that's a limiting belief. Because if at least one person on the planet doesn't believe that, it's got to be a limiting belief. And now I want that too. I want that. I get to claim that for myself. You get to have a juicy, robust marriage, relationship, whatever. Wherever you're applying these concepts, you get to have that. Yes, you do. I challenge you to have it. I dare you to have it. I desire this for you. I want my daughter to have it. I want my mom to have it. I get to have it and you get to have it. So yes, it will require some inner work. You know, inner work can be hard sometimes, but it's only as hard as you make it, right? It's only as hard as your beliefs. Yes, I'm not saying that like working through the sexual trauma from my past was easy. No, no. Working through the rape was easy. No. But working through those things, releasing those things made my life bliss. So, did I allow it to be easier? Yes. Easier doesn't always mean easy, but now I get to have all of this, right? I wouldn't allow myself to have this because I thought I was broken, because I had limiting beliefs, I had trauma, right? So, we have to remember, and I shared this at the Orange County Intensive. What my favorite part of that intensive, oh my God, there were several favorite things, but the my bodyguard, um he didn't know like what I teach, right? Like, so he was hired by one of my team members who had a previous like working relationship. So he didn't know what he was getting into. So he's there, and obviously because he's there supporting me, he's listening to the event. And this is how my team described it. At first, he was there on his phone and he's kind of like, checked out when I'm speaking, and then when I would be done, he would come and get me off the stage and everything. And this is this was so beautiful because what happened is, in one of the segments, he said to me, he said, "Oh my God." He's like, "That was life-changing." He goes, "This is why my wife does that. This is what she means." And I'm like, "Oh, you're married?" And he goes, "Yeah, I've been married for 4 years." And he's like, "Wow." He's like, "What you said makes sense." And so I shared this with my team, and they're like, "We saw when it hit him." They said that he was like this during the break, or during when I was speaking, and then he did this. And then he put down his phone and he was listening. And I'm like, that makes me so happy. I love it. By the end of that event, he told me he was gonna get my book, and he was like excited about going home and like sharing this information with his wife. That makes me so happy because at the end of the day, we're all good people trying to live a good life, right? One of the things I shared at the intensive that my bodyguard said he really resonated with is when I talked about how most people in the world are good people. They're trying their best. They want to have a happy relationship. They want to feel good about their work. They want to be good parents. They want to be good daughters. They want to be good, sons and daughters and all the things. They don't know how a lot of times. They weren't taught how. Okay. So we have to, when we approach all of this, we do have to approach it from the the angle of maybe they just don't know. Okay. Now, this doesn't mean you have to put up with bad behavior. Like most of us are not married to predators, right? We're married to good people that maybe did not receive these trainings, and they weren't told about limiting beliefs and perceptions and container issues, right? So as their wife or as their husband, maybe we have men watching this now. He actually told me, my bodyguard, by the end of the training, he's like, promise me you're going to market to men. He's like, men need this work. And I was like, I know there's men watching, and I will definitely consider this. And even the guy that we had hired to do our video, he works in like massive video, like he's created so many reality TV shows. By the end of it, he was like, I learned so much. I learned so much from this. So what does that tell you? Two men who are, I know one of them was married and a father, and the other one I think was in a partnership. They came in, they're at work, they're just doing their job, and they hear something useful and they're like, ooh, can I apply this to my marriage? Can I apply this to my relationship? What does that tell you? What does that tell you? It tells you that people want to learn. Sometimes they just don't know. They maybe don't have the luxury of even knowing what the hell inner work is. And this is something my professors told me at university. Several of my professors were teams. So I had 3 sets of professors that were husband and wife teams. So they had been married for like decades, and they both ran successful therapy, like marital therapy services, and taught at Northwestern. So I had 3 sets of these professors. And several of them said this thing to me and to all the students. They said that a lot of the reason that men shy away from therapy is because the verbiage that is used and the way that it's conducted, it actually taps into women's natural gifts, and it actually puts men at a disadvantage. So for example, let's say, I'm just going to make up this example. Let's say that therapy actually required us to open really heavy, like really tight jars. And whoever could open that jar was the correct one. They were the one that was the right one, and the other partner was wrong. You're bad. You're the wrong one in the marriage. You couldn't open the jar. Okay, what's wrong with this? Tell me in the comments right now. What's wrong with this scenario? So a husband and wife team goes to this therapy session, and the therapist goes, here's a jar. Whoever can open it is the correct person. Okay, so the number one thing that's wrong with that is men will instantly have an advantage. All the women will lose. They're the wrong ones. Why? Because men have 10 to 15 times more testosterone than women. Therefore, they have more physical strength, and therefore they're more likely to open those jars. Is this correct? Well, what my professors were saying is that therapy requires words and communication. And we know this from evolutionary studies, scientific studies, that women on average use 20,000 words daily and men use 7,000 words. These differences are also felt in 1 year newborns. So, 1 hour old newborns. They have studied babies that were in like, that little place at the hospital where they put all the babies when they're being fed and all that stuff. They studied these babies. I learned these like 20 years ago at university. So these studies have been around for a long time. And they found that female babies responded better to words and facial expressions and made more noises than male babies. So this is innate in us. So what my professors were saying is that therapy is set up where the man always feels like he's losing. Men are not equipped for emotional warfare, and therapy is emotional warfare, and it taps into female natural gifts while putting men at a disadvantage. So what these professors were saying is that in their practice as therapists, for like, one of them was a therapist for like the set was like for 40 years or something. They said that what makes them really good therapists is that they put more emphasis on making the man feel comfortable, because most of the time the woman is already comfortable in therapy. She's dragging him there, and then he already like women can talk and talk and talk about their feelings and what, everything they're doing wrong and all of that stuff. And so they would make the man feel more comfortable, and the session would be great. This is why my husband and I, we have a course together, and I actually have it on a 50% off flash sale for you guys. It's our only course that we taught together with the intention that it was going to be a couples course. Many of you guys were confused and said, why did you call it the $1 Million Man if it's a couples course? Because of my professors. Because they said if you're marketing something to men and women, and it's something in personal development, coaching, therapy, counseling, anything that requires communication, you have to make the man feel more comfortable, and he's going to come to you. Why do you think that two males that came as someone coming to video my event and someone coming as my bodyguard felt comfortable in my presence and were excited to take these trainings home to their wives? Because of my professor, I learned that I have to allow the man to feel comfortable. But what do we do in personal development? What's happening in the coaching and the therapy and the dating circles is we're attacking men. But then we want a relationship with them and provide for me and love me and romance me and sex me up and buy me stuff, but we hate you. But you're wrong. But you don't get it, right? So I hope what you're getting here today is we are different. Men and women are different. First of all, innately. Then masculine and feminine energy is different. So even if you're in a same-sex relationship, you have those differences with the person that's more in their masculine and the person with, it is. And then on top of that, we have damn conditioning. So your partner may have grown up in a relationship where it was not okay to talk about feelings. It was not okay to talk about limiting beliefs. And you may have done all this inner work where you're like all up in your feelings all the time. Well, he's like, oh, this feels uncomfortable. So we have to be able to communicate in a way where we both feel comfortable, where we both feel safe. Okay? Anything involving communication, women have a natural advantage. So whoever has the natural advantage, we have to allow the other person to feel safe when we're bringing them into our world. Okay? Container issue was the third one. Fourth one, gracefully, we're going to bring in the concept of masculine and feminine energy. Not necessarily just in gender, but masculine and feminine energy within us and how that plays out in our own work, in our parenting. We're having a common language, right? In our union. This is important. Surprisingly, this was the one that we missed because Irfan was born and raised in Pakistan. And Pakistani people are very, very embodied naturally in masculine and feminine energy. Because they're embodied in it, it's like trying to convince a fish that water exists. They're like, yeah, duh, water. I'm in it. So what? But because I was born and raised here and I went back and forth between the two cultures, I could obviously see things and be like, oh my God, here I'm in water and here I'm outside of water. So having him see it from a distance was interesting as someone that is naturally embodied in it, because his culture, you will never in Pakistan find someone talking about masculine and feminine energy, because it's like talking about your nose. It's like, duh, we have a nose, we breathe. It's just how they live. So you want to start introducing this. What you don't want to do is doing it as like, I'm feminine and I'm right, and you're masculine and you're wrong, or masculine energy bad, feminine energy, like, no. Look, that's like saying my right hand, oh, this is my left, actually. My left hand, I love you so good. I love you. Right hand, bad right hand. It's like, no, we have all of those energies in us. We need both of them, right? So what I've made okay in my marriage is that you will actually, if you come to visit, you'll see me saying this stuff. Oh, I've been a little too much in my masculine today. I need to do something a little juicy. I need to like, or my husband will ask me, hey, did you want to eat, Chinese today or Thai? And I'm going to say, I've been in my masculine way too much today. I'm ready to retire my brain and just surrender to you. And he's like, that's a cue that he doesn't need to ask me anything. I'm just lead me, feed me, clothe me, tell me where to sit. I'm like done making decisions, right? So we've made it safe. My kids, you will hear my kids saying, Mom, oh my God, like I've been in my masculine all day today, or I need to do something a little feminine. I'm like tired. Right now, my kids are going through this whole thing. So you guys know my kids are virtually schooled. So they have like teachers and an online curriculum. And I was just sharing this with a team member. So they can move at their pace, but there's teachers, there's things that need to be graded, there's life coaches and all that stuff. So before we went on this Orange County trip, we had set a schedule for my kids where Irfan made like a daily chart. Irfan loves the charts. And he has this whiteboard for them. He made a chart that if they did, this many assignments every day, then they could not have anything to do in Orange County and they could just enjoy that vacation. So they were very excited about that and they did it. They finished all their assignments and caught up and got ahead. 2 days before we left for Orange County, the school emails and says, oh my God, the STAR testing is coming up and we have all these extra sessions. And long story short, we found out that they were going to have to do these 6 extra Zoom meetings while we were on vacation. As you can imagine, my kids were kind of disappointed, right? And so my husband's like trying to manage all of this as I'm busy, like, working with my team and setting up this event. And so he's dealing with that. He's like getting us packed up. He's like, doing all the masculine things that he does brilliantly. And I started noticing on the flight that there was kind of this energy that we were getting into, like, oh my God, like, well, how could the school do this last minute kind of energy? And so I had a moment where I was like, I'm going to project myself into the school's body for a second. I didn't say this out loud yet. So I'm on the flight and I'm like, I'm going to put myself into their shoes because I like to like play devil's advocate so I can see things from a different perspective. So I went to the school's shoes and I'm like, okay, the STAR testing is coming. Every single school in Texas is required to take the STAR testing. Why are they acting like this? We've done so many STAR testing before. Since Armand was in first grade when we moved here, no school has acted delirious the way they're acting. And then I'm like, oh my God, they're an online school. What if they feel like they have to prove themselves harder? What if something's happened in the past where they feel like if their kids all don't excel at like a certain level, and my kids, luckily, thankfully, always are in like the 98th percentile for everything that they get tested for. So we were kind of acting like you guys are overreacting. It's going to be fine. But when I put myself in their situation, I'm like, what if they're scared that they might not be considered a real school? Like, I don't know what happens behind the scenes, right? There's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes, even in my business, that even when I explain to my team, they're like, oh my God, I didn't even think about this. I'm like, yes, because when you're not in it, there's things that happen that you don't even know happen that you have to work through. So when I started thinking from their perspective, all of a sudden, my energy shifted from why would they spring this on my kids last minute to I see that they're worried. They want all of these kids to excel. They're not thinking about just my kids and going like, yeah, they're going to be fine. They're thinking about all the kids and they're thinking we need to make sure that all these kids excel at the STAR testing because the STAR testing proves that if the schools and the teachers are doing a good job or not, right? I shifted my energy and I said to Irfan, I'm like, you know what, babe? Could it be that because this is an online school, they are like extra hyper vigilant about like these test scores? And all of a sudden it was like a light bulb. He's like, oh my God. Because I'm like, you're always telling me, because my husband manages most of the schools, like his like school stuff. He was telling me, he's like, they're so organized. This is so unlike them. I'm like, I think this is what's happening. I think they're in panic mode. I think that for whatever reason that we don't know, we have to give them the goodness of intention that they have shown up for us and our kids the last 2 years. They have been brilliant. In fact, Armand went to that school as well. So I'm like, they've been nothing but amazing. So we have to give them the benefit of the doubt that if they are springing this on the kids, there must be a good reason. And all of a sudden, the energy shifted. And because our energy shifted, we were presenting it to our kids of like, you know what? This is great. We're gonna do this. Like we're gonna make our schedule. Before we have breakfast, we'll do this training. And we presented it in a way where my kids now got excited about it. And we're like, you know what? This time you guys are gonna get even better than the 98th percentile. You guys are like, you guys are prepared. You know what Alina said to me last night? She was like, Mom, I can't wait for next week. I'm like, what's happening next week? And she's like, my STAR testing. She's never said that about testing before. So it's about, as women, we are the energy keepers. And we keep the energy, the culture of our marriage, of our business, of our parenting. And it helps to first notice what I did on the plane. I worked through it within myself first. Because I like seeing my husband kind of annoyed about the school situation was making me annoyed. But the truth is, this school has consistently shown up for Armand, Ayan, and Alina. We love this school. The teachers are freaking fantastic. Like, honestly, they care more about my kids' grades than I care. Like, a lot of times I'm like, I don't remember what I got in 5th grade. Like, it's fine, right? Like, I'm one of those kind of parents of like, as long as you're learning and having fun, it's fine. But like, these teachers really care about their grades, about their. And so I'm like, if they're doing this, there must be a good reason. We don't know everything they know. When I shifted the energy and I kind of shared that with Irfan, and all of a sudden he's like, you know what, you're right. They have shown up for us. And all of a sudden, if they're springing this on us and they seem to be really panicked, there must be a good reason. What if, we don't know this, what if they've been threatened by the state that, hey, some of your kids weren't doing great? So like, maybe this is not you know what I mean? Like, we don't know the full story. We don't know the legal stuff, the stuff that happens behind the scene. That's how I want you to also think of your marriage. Like, you don't know what your partner's thinking. You don't know their limiting beliefs. You don't know their past trauma. Some things they might not even know. They might not have shared you. So approaching it from this goodness of intention is so important. This like, hey, help me understand this. I can't tell you how many times in my marriage my husband has said something and I thought some kind of way with it. And then I was like, can you explain to me what that meant? And he explained it. I'm like, oh, I was like reading, like I was like projecting my own insecurity onto this thing. And like, that's what he meant by that. Oh, that's cute, right? So just being in this element of like, oh, well, what does that mean to you? Or, oh, that's interesting. One of the things that I trained you guys in the Orange County Intensive is that men and women metabolize trust very differently. Very differently. We're evolved that way. And I don't know if I have time to go into it right now, but I'm gonna in a couple days I'm gonna open up the purchase. You're gonna be able to purchase the audio recordings of the Orange County event. It also, I had bonus in Incarnate in there and the portal recordings in there too. So you guys are gonna be able to purchase that. So you'll hear me talking about that. That's the part that the bodyguard resonated with the most. He said that it was like such a different perspective for him. So always approaching things from like, okay, like masculine, feminine, like different perspectives. Like, could this mean something different to my partner? Could I be adding something more to this? Like, when we got into this energy of like, maybe there's things that the school is dealing with, and that's why they're like super panicked about this test and adding all of this, what we consider unnecessary busy work, but maybe they have a reason. The entire energy shifted. Yeah. So last one, 5-1. Ooh, this is my favorite. Okay, I've been talking a lot. Let me relax for a second. Kristen said, one thing I've stopped doing is attaching my own made-up story to what people do. Yep, that's I feel you on that. That's been a tough one for me too, right? All of us, because we evolved to really care about what our tribe members are saying about us, because back in the day, it meant survival. But now we realize that people have a whole bunch of opinions. Like, one thing, back in the tribal days, everyone was the same race, spoke the same language, and had the same belief systems. Now we're living in this melting pot global kind of world, especially on social media, where people have different education levels, different language, different socioeconomic status, different viewpoints, different religions, but they're all like watching you. or like in your world. Obviously, they're not all gonna get it. Like in the old days, if someone that didn't belong in your tribe showed up, you shot arrows at them. Okay, we can't shoot arrows at people from social media. So all kinds of people are going to show up, hear the same information, perceive something completely different, and have a completely different experience. Like, it's just the reality of the world that we live in, right? And before, even in marriage, typically you married someone from your tribe. They grew up like you, they looked like you, they had the same belief systems, they worshiped the same gods, right? They danced in the same rain. They were pretty much like you. There wasn't a lot of difference. Now you might marry someone that's from a completely different culture because you met him at work. Well, his childhood looks nothing like your childhood. His belief systems are nothing like your belief systems. Obviously, you're going to have to give a lot more generosity of intent in that scenario, not because you're wrong or he's wrong, but because we no longer marry within our tribes anymore. It's just the reality of the global planet. And as beautiful as that is, it's going to come with some more understanding, some more inner work. You guys with me? Let me know. I have been talking for a long time. Okay, let me share the last one and then we'll do a Q&A. How long have I been live streaming? Is this like super long? Oh my God. Okay, last one. 5 is the concept of couple bubble and family bubble. I did say that everything I'm teaching with you, even if I use relationship examples, you can expand that out. You can use this in your company, everywhere. Let me start with the couple bubble. So a couple bubble was a concept that was first brought to my attention from another therapist. His book was called, shoot, Wired for Love. I love it when it comes to me. Okay, it was called Wired for Love. I'm pretty sure it's in my on Amazon store in my linked books, but if not, remind me. I'll put it in there. I'll put it in there. Wired for Love. Yay. Okay, so Wired for Love. I apologize. I forget the guy's name. I have like so many books and things that I consume that I forget sometimes. He talked about this concept, and I had already heard of this concept from my father. But my father, rest his soul, was a disembodied teacher of the concept. So I kind of like heard it, but didn't know how to embody it. So my dad would, when we were little, he would give this example. He would say that if someone shows up and they're, sorry, this is going to be a really weird example, but this is my dad's example. I'm going to share it. My dad would say that if someone showed up and they're trying to like pick a fight with you, you cannot fight them back with a finger. You can't hurt them. You cannot fight them back with 2 fingers, but you can punch them. And we'd be like, Dad, what the hell does that mean, right? What do you mean, Dad? And he would say that this is what a family unit is. Separately, we're all like fingers. We can't really do anything. We're not united. We're not strong. We can't protect ourselves. We can't like do anything. But he's like, when we unite, and there was 5 of us, so he would always say this. He was like this, we are united. People are gonna be like, oh, don't mess with them. They can punch you because they're. Sorry, this was my dad's example. So I grew up hearing about family loyalty and all of that stuff. But it wasn't until I read this book, and when he talked, I was like, oh my God, that's what Dad was talking about. And then I was like, this is what we need to make our marriage more robust. So I brought that concept to my husband. And again, I was like, you remember how you were talking about the robust concept? I'm like it's all you. Like, I'm not teaching you. You remember when you were such a genius and you were talking about robustness? And he's like, yeah, I remember that. I was like, well, I read this thing and I feel like this guy is talking about what you're talking about. Now he's interested. Okay. So I explained to him this concept of the couple bubble, and he loved it. The next day, I heard him telling about that concept to someone like he invented it. And I was like, yes, yes, it landed. So, what the couple bubble concept is, I'm going to tell you with how Irfan and I do this, and then you can project this out to other relationships. What this means is that Irfan and I are in a bubble together. Like, think of like this glow, like pink bubble. And this bubble is our unity, it's our divine union. That's what I mean by divine union. It's our like, it's our like safe place. And inside this bubble, we do everything together. And from this bubble, we deal with everything else outside of the bubble. So that means our children are not inside this bubble. And this is where a lot of my students were like, but Mina, my kids come first. My kids come first. And I believe that giving my children a healthy relationship model is important. So because I love my kids and I want to show them what a healthy relationship looks like, my kids do not come first. The couple bubble comes first because that is my gift to my kids, is the couple bubble. So we parent together from that. Irfan's family, as much as I love them, I manifested that family outside the couple bubble. My family, outside the couple bubble. Irfan's job, outside the couple bubble. My job, outside the couple bubble. Our neighbors, we love them to pieces. Love you guys if you guys are watching. Outside the couple bubble. So what happens is, like, let's say, let me actually give you a real example. Since Armand was 13, he's been saying, when I turn 18, I'm going to go travel the world. And we're like, okay, you know, it's a 13-year-old. Like, yeah, we want to support his dreams. Guess what happened when he turned 18? A few months after he turned 18, well, actually, not even a few months. I think that was a little like couple months. A month after he turned 18, he started his own business. You guys know he does the human design readings, and he's also in school full time. And 2 or 3 months later, he's like, I'm going to go travel the world. And we're like, what? You can't do that. And he's like, I've been saying that literally since I was 13, that I'm going to go travel. I'm like, yeah, but that's when you were 13. Now you're 18. You're not allowed to go do that. He's like, Mom, but that's my dream. Like, I want to do that, right? So all of a sudden, there was like this like conflict in my house, and we're like, you know, Irfan's like, I really think that you should not travel by yourself. You're only 18. You've been so sheltered. You've only ever gone anywhere. He's like, no, I want to go travel the world. He's like, I want to go to Europe. And Irfan's like, but we just did 4 weeks in Europe, and we went to all the countries you wanted to go to, and we took that trip because you want. He's like, yeah, and I appreciate that, but I want to go travel by myself. So we had this moment of like just panic, as you guys can imagine. We raised our kids like super sheltered, right? And Irfan's like, well, you've never even gone to like the next town down by yourself. Like, you've never even traveled outside Texas by yourself, like even to like Dallas, like another city. How are you going to go? And he's like, but that's what I always wanted to do. So now what happened is that you guys know I journal, I meditate, right? So I'm journaling and I'm like, Mina, you're kind of like being a hypocrite here. Like, you've always like taught your kids to like go for your dreams. Like, you know, you're basically not right now in this moment practicing what you preach. You taught Armand to be strong, to be independent, to stand up for his beliefs, to like, you know, all of the stuff. And now, so I started working through it in my journal. So slowly, I'm like, you know, Irfan's like, I can't believe he's doing this. Like, I'm trying to talk him out of it. And I'm like, yeah, you know, I'm nervous too. I'm very scared. But we did teach him to be strong. Like I'm kind of like, I'm in that mode where I start working through it, and I'm like teaching like Irfan this, right? There were a few days where all of a sudden Irfan and I are not in agreement, because all of a sudden I'm like, you know, it's gonna be fine. Like, you know, he's going with his friends. Like, all of this, like, I start working through it, and all of a sudden my mind has. Are you guys still with me? Is this too long? Let me know. I just did a sale for the Femme Fortune Container course for like 6 days. Did you guys miss? Some of you guys miss it. It was like the biggest sale we've had this year. That you guys really like that course. So yeah, okay, thank you. I didn't want to make it look like I'm just like rambling on. So there were like 3 or 4 days where Irfan and I are suddenly not in agreement. Gently, like we're not arguing, but I'm just like, well, babe, like, he has been saying that since he was 13. And so I'm kind of like trying to softening Irfan and Irfan's like, I just have a bad feeling about this. Like I literally do everything for him. And as I'm listening to Irfan more, I started hearing some things that I wasn't hearing before. I started hearing like these feelings of like feeling like I invested this my whole life into raising him. He's my son, and all of a sudden he's like going off. And I'm like, I started asking him questions. I said, "Do you feel like you can't protect him? Do you feel like, that you feel he didn't ask for your permission?" And all of a sudden it comes out. Irfan's like, yeah, I feel like I should have been involved in this decision. I feel like I nurtured him, raised him, took care of him, protected him, since he was 4. When I got married to Irfan, Arman was 4. And he's like, and now he's 18, so he's just gonna like leave my house, like he's just gonna leave, like I'm nothing. Like, and I'm like, well, babe, like, I see why you would feel that way. And thank you so much. You have protected him and provided for him and done all of that. And I appreciate that so much. But I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's not how Arman is seeing it. Like, he's not saying, let me disrespect my dad and like leave. He's been saying to us since he was 13 that I want to travel the world. And so what we had to do basically, because if we go to Arman and he sees that mom's doing this and dad, now all of a sudden it's like mom versus dad. Are you guys with me on this? Right? It's like, it's kind of like, are you guys, yeah, Paula said she missed it. I have sent out so many emails. Make sure that you guys are on my email list. So email my team and I'll let them know that if anyone listening for this call, they'll make an exception and do it for the next 24 hours for you guys. Okay. So what we had to do is we had to get on the same page. So for like 3 or 4 days, we talked about it. I encouraged Irfan to discuss it with his friends because a lot of his friends have older kids. So Irfan called one of his best friends, whose kids are a little bit older than Irfan's, than our kids, and he told them what's happening and how he feels like Arman's too young and blah blah. And his friend goes, "Can Arman coach my kids?" He's like, "Are you telling me that your 18-year-old is a successful business owner, has enough money to invest and go traveling the world and no longer requires financial support from you and wants to go travel the world?" He's like, dude, what are you doing that I'm not doing? He's like, my kids are still at home and I'm still paying for them. That I could see immediately Irfan softening up because he's like, oh, this is not a negative thing. Like, this is a good thing, right? Then Irfan called his uncle, who again, he's got old, and his uncle was like, look, he's not leaving you. He's always going to need you. Trust me, I have a 30-year-old. He still calls me every day needing advice. He's like, you're still going to be providing for him. You're still going to be protecting him forever. Like, that's never going to go away. So we worked through it in like 3 days. Then when we went out, meaning from the couple bubble, where it said, hey, Arman, come to the bedroom. We want to talk to you. So Arman comes over. We sat him down and I let Irfan lead. Irfan was like, look, I still think this is a bad idea. You're too young. However, I know that this is your dream. You've been saying this since you're 13. And, I want to just keep you and contain you and keep you safe. But this is how if you want to do this, I will support you. He's like, I have some requirements and some requests, and this is what I require. Can you prove to me by doing this, this, and this? If you can get these things right, then I will trust that you can do this. So they had like an agreement for like 2 or 3 weeks, and he practiced certain things. Irfan trained him in certain things, and then he went off, and it was beautiful. But the reason I'm telling you this story is that imagine if I had gone to Arman and I'd be like, well, I'm supporting you, but daddy thinks this is a bad idea. All of a sudden, there's a loss of containment. Children, friends, family, world, life, like needs to feel a level of safety and containment. We work through this thing this was like, to be honest with you guys, it was very scary for us to go through that. Like when Arman left, this was like 18 months ago, to go travel, he was calling every day, he was texting. But you know what was happening? I would see Irfan literally tracking his location like all day. And I'm like, Irfan, like, I'm scared too. I'm panicked too. Like, my baby is now out in the world. Like, but like, we can't stalk the kid. Like, he's gonna be fine, right? And he was like, any friends you make, immediately get their phone number and text it to me so I know exactly who they are and I have their phone number. And I'm like, we have all of his friends' phone number. Like, it's gonna be okay, right? So we had to work through it. And then I would have nights where I was like crying and panicked and my like empty, literally empty, like I was like freaking out. And her phone would be like, it's gonna be okay. Like I just spoke to him. I would be like, Armand hasn't texted me for 2 hours. He's like, he just texted me 30 minutes ago. I'm like, okay, he's alive. He's okay. But but if we didn't have this couple bubble, we wouldn't be able to deal with this. We would have been fighting. We would have been like one of our friends was telling us, this older couple, they were like, the worst kind of marriages are when like the littlest thing goes wrong and you start pointing fingers. He's like, that's when you know that marriage is doomed. Because like if we didn't have our couple bubble and this started happening, imagine if I was like, oh, Irfan, you're gonna make this all about yourself. And what if Irfan was like, it's because of you he wants to go travel the world because you're always talking about limiting beliefs and like going after your desires. Now we would have been fighting and arguing and we wouldn't have been on the same team. And we would have been making this all about us while our baby, who's now all grown up, wants to go do this amazing thing, right? Like he's on this whole new level. Sorry, I'm sidetracking, but I have to tell you this other thing. I'm so proud of myself. This was a new level for me that I reached last week, but without disclosing my son's locations just for safety reasons. But up until this, so what he does is he comes and goes. So he goes to a couple countries, that comes back home, and then goes. So he does back and forth. But I never want to reveal his like locations and stuff just for safety. Up until this point, up until last week, every time he would be like, okay, mom, I'm like leaving this country and going to this other country. I found myself texting him saying, okay, but like, don't talk to strangers on the flight and like, make sure you eat on time and like, don't go out at night. This was literally me. Last week when he texted me, I'm so proud of myself. I was like, have a safe flight. And I dropped in and I didn't have any of that like panicked energy or like God, like, you know, like as a mom, I was finally last week after 18 months of this, got myself to a spot where, and he was so happy. Up until now, he's handled it very gracefully. Like every time I would do that craziness, he was like, thanks for the reminder, mom. Yes, mom, I'm not going to talk to strangers. And yes, mom, blah, 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 right? But the interaction that we had last week, I could feel that is exactly what his soul was craving. Because he was just like, oh, like, have a safe flight. Like, she's trusting me. She's treating me like an adult. And this is because of inner work. This is because we're always growing and expanding and learning new things. It's not about perfection. Like I openly always admit when I'm having container issues. My son becoming 18, having his own money and traveling the world was a container expansion for me, for my husband, for him, and for our family bubble. So we have our couple bubble, and then we had our family bubble. And then we had to go through this hole in our family bubble for a while because we were like, you know, we were 5 and now we're 4. And it's like, where's, you know, we had to work through that. We had to help the kids work through that. And working through, there is also cultural things. In my culture, you don't just up and leave at 18. Like you leave the house when you get married. So like Irfan's nephews moved out of their parents' house when they were like in their late 20s when they got married. So culturally, we had to do inner work together. We had to be like, oh my God, everyone's going to judge us. Like who leaves at 18 in our culture? And then we had to be like, do we care more about other people judging us or what Arman wants? Like, are we being integrity to what we teach? So I told Arman all of this. He knows all of this. I was like, part of me is freaking out because look at my family and your family. Like, my family and daddy's family. Like, we don't do this in the Pakistani culture. You don't wake up at 18 and leave your parents' house. Like, you stay until you're married. Like, until you're 30 and you're married. And he's like, I know, mom, but like, I've been wanting to do this since I'm 13. So when I have like my own biases, stuff, I tell my kids, I told them that a part of me is feeling like people are gonna judge me that I'm a bad parent because you went traveling the world. He's like, yes, yes, they might. Or they might be like, how amazing is she that her 18-year-old has enough money to go travel the world? I'm like, oh, that's a different perspective, right? I'm like, not to make it all about me, but thank you. Right. You're right. There's always multiple ways of seeing every situation. I taught him that. That made me feel so proud. And what I realized through all of this is at the end of the day, do we trust our marriage and do we trust our parenting enough to trust that we have everything? We have given our children all the resources to make their own decisions, right? All of that couldn't have happened if we didn't have a culture in my family where we can openly talk about these things without triggering each other. So I'm going to stop talking now. I'm here for you guys. Yes, even parenting needs to move as a team and as a considerate girl. I feel like that has required the most. That has required the most. Kids, I've seen this with clients, family members. Armand did this to us once when he was little, when we didn't have the couple bubble, is that they figure out who to ask and how to manipulate. So they'll figure out, oh, mom and dad are not united on this thing. So I'm going to pit mom and dad against each other. It's just kids can do that kind of stuff. But since my kids know, even if Irfan and I don't agree on something, we work through it privately. We work through it. And then by the time we come to our kids, even if we share with them, hey, we didn't both agree to this, but this is how we work through it, they know that they're together. They know that mom and dad are always on the same team. They know that, there's no pitting anyone against each other. There's like we're a team as a family and they're a team as a marriage. Oh, thank you, Lionel, for letting us know that you're start. I didn't know you could do that. So you can join a live stream and you can start at the beginning. I grew up in the mom versus dad kind of situation. It was very confusing. I will do it better, hopefully, because I really desire a strong unit and therefore a strong couple bubble. Yes. And, sometimes men need other men to tell them about these things. It's that whole evolutionary thing. Sometimes I want to just tell you, I wish there was a way I could just download this to you guys, but I've explained this to you guys before. Men learn better from other men because of the way that they've evolved. So that's why I had Irfan put all of these things in the $1 Million Man course. There were men that took that course. You'll hear them in the recordings. And it's the same thing their wife might be telling them, and they're like, no, we don't want to do this. And they hear someone like Irfan saying, they're like, oh, yeah, I want to do that too. I want that in my marriage. So that's why I put the $1 Million Man course on a huge 50% off flash sale for you guys. Let me go back and get some of these questions. I appreciate your teaching so much. The concepts are simple and accessible to everyone, and you are proof of what happens when faith and inner work meet. Oh my God. I want to cry. That is so sweet. I want to read that again. I truly just received that. You are proof of what happens when faith and inner work meets. Oh, faith, the union of faith and inner work. Oh, I love that. Thank you. Paula said, I was wondering during the event what the crew will be thinking about the event and the information going on. Yeah, it's so interesting. I did have this moment where I was like, is it going to be awkward? Because I'm used to just teaching in front of like women in my team, but it wasn't awkward. In fact, they loved it. So that was good. Brianna said, I was wondering what he was thinking at the videographer. Now you guys know they loved it. I'm so humbled and blessed that people that are like not a part of this world at all could take something from it. Yes. There was another one that was a super chat. Shama, how can South Asians be provided for without giving up their power? It seems that men want South Asian women to be career oriented and domestic, which is imbalance. So, is anyone else reading a lot of limiting beliefs in this? Everything I'm teaching you, like 80% of it comes from the South Asian community. Because South Asian community hasn't evolved out of how Homo sapiens evolved. So here's how I want you to receive this. As the woman of the house, as the lady of the house, there are certain things that are naturally your domain because we are better at it. So, for example, my husband handles so much in our household. However, he misses some things because he doesn't have that natural gift. So, for example, if he says to the kids, "Hey, wrap this up and then we're going to do this," they're doing it. But he misses if there's like a slight bit of disappointment in Ayan's face, or if Alina looks a little tired, because the mamta energy that is present in a woman is not present in men the same way. Just like Irfan might notice things that need protection and providing better than me, because like I when Arman was going to travel, I didn't see it as like me not being able to provide for him because I'm not a man, right? So we're different. So how I've seen healthy South Asian couples dealing with this, because all in my family and Irfan's family, all the women are career oriented, meaning they're doctors, lawyers, engineers, right? But they're the ones that hire the maids in the house. Like they're not like, you have to do this and I did this and 50% and Venmo. No, the husband pays for everything. And the domain of the house is there. Like even now in my marriage, I have a housekeeping team. If anything goes wrong with them, I have to deal with that. Because typically in a traditional marriage, I would have been responsible for the house. Do you see that? So if Irfan's like, oh, I don't like the way that the housekeeper moved my thing in my office, he tells me and then I deal with it. That's me contributing to the household. He doesn't care whether I clean the house or someone else cleans the house, but it's still my domain. So there are ways of handling it tactfully without eliciting the ego of like him versus me. I have to do this, I have to do that, right? So I'm still responsible for the emotional well-being and the household things, but and then he's responsible for the providing, protecting a lot of things. And then there are some things in which my husband and I don't follow the gender roles, but they work for us because we've decided that it works. We were just talking about that in our walk yesterday. So there is a family, like a couple in our circle that's newlywed, and they're in that stage where they're renegotiating. I don't want to call it like a power struggle, but they're like negotiating who does what in the marriage, and it's showing up as some conflict in their field. And we were talking about it, and I said to Irfan, I'm like, well, we do some of those things wrong, but it works for us. And Irfan's like, yes, because you and I decided that that was okay. But culturally, it's not okay. So do you see that a lot of things are okay as long as they're from the couple bubble, as long as you're doing it from this united place? Alexandra said, when I'm learning spiritual concepts, my husband asks me, what are you learning? I give him a shallow answer because I think he will judge me. Then he feels that I'm not open with him. So personally, one way you could do it is you could take one little thing of how you're gonna embody it. Like I share things with Irfan all the time. I can't help it. I get really excited. And so I might read a book or watch a podcast or notice something in a video on YouTube or on a movie and be like, oh my God, I learned this. But I share it with him in a way that like how I'm going to apply this so that it's not like some kind of woo-woo thing or something. Irfan's okay with woo-woo at this point. He loves my woo-woo. But I know some men, it can be a little disjarring in the beginning. But I share it in a way of like how it's going to impact my life. And that, I think that, I have been talking for way too long, ladies. Ladies, I think this was like way too long. So my throat is like super weird, but I'm going to take a couple more. And then what I'll do is I'll try to come back. I don't know what my schedule is like tomorrow, but maybe next week or maybe over the weekend, we'll see. My kids have that, like all that star testing stuff. So when they're busy doing that, that's a great time for me to live stream. So if they've got more star testing stuff tomorrow, then I'll show up and I'll do a part 2. Watch this first. That way you can show up for like a Q&A. But my voice, oh, thank you, Kayla. I appreciate your love, babe. She said this was amazing. I wanted to stay more for a Q&A, but I don't know how long I can do this. Um, Let me see. Let me get another question that I can answer. How can the couple bubble work in parenting toddlers? So the first thing that you need to understand is that whether you have kids or not, whether you have in-laws or not, whether you have jobs or not, if you're wanting to be in a relationship, you have a couple bubble. So how it works is everything outside of you and him is outside that couple bubble. So that means that I teach this in my conscious couples course as well, but you can also learn about this in the Million Dollar Babe couples course that Irfan and I did together. I'll throw that link in the description. Is that it's never Irfan versus Mina, like never. Like even if you were to come to me and you were to say, or Irfan said this and this, be like, he must have a reason. Then I might go up to Irfan and be like, hey babe, what happened? Like I might discuss that in private. But we are one team. No one, in-laws, children, no one on this planet can pit us against each other because we discuss everything privately first. We get an understanding within us first. We are robust. We used to be that couple that people would pit against each other. People knew that like evolutionarily, I know in my culture this is well known. Some people might get triggered, but women are always going to be emotionally the weak link when it comes to like gossip, when it comes to, I wanted to do this whole training of how women mask jealousy and how they can completely ruin your life. I've talked about this in private courses. I've never talked about this on YouTube. Women can be dangerous. They're evolved to be so. They can ruin your entire life and not even know that they're doing it because it's so wired in. Some people do it maliciously, yes. Some people do it without even realizing it. So we have in my culture checks and balances in place to prevent that. That's why men, have you noticed that your partners are very suspicious of your female friendships? Rightfully so, because the wrong female friend, the wrong cousin, your sister, your mom even can put the wrong thing in your mind and put doubt in your unit and break you apart. And all of a sudden, because of the way that we metabolize trust differently, all of a sudden you're attacking the one person that's on your team. So this has happened to me. This is why our founder was like, we need a robust marriage. So I'm allowed to mistrust my husband. I'm allowed to have doubt, but I always go to him and we discuss it and we say, hey, what did you mean by this? Can you explain this? We work at it privately. No third person. The third person in your marriage would always be the devil. Okay? So be careful. Like one of the things that I was having this conversation with my nephew who's getting married this year, and we were just in Orange County spending time with them. And you know, he was discussing with me some of the things that are happening just in his circle. And I told him one thing. I said, "Listen, the thing that you need to be most careful with your future with your fiance is who, is her is her mother, sisters, and best friends the type of people that when you're having a bad day in your marriage, when she goes to them and she says, "Oh my God, I'm having a bad day in my marriage," are they the type of person they're gonna be like, "Leave him, girl power. It's better to be single. Like he's an a-hole anymore. I didn't like him." Or are they the type of person that are gonna be like, "You know what? It happens in all marriages. There's gonna be misunderstandings, and let's work through it. Let's help you guys find a solution. Let's try to see his side, and let's try to see your side." I have been even on YouTube been accused of, you know, being someone that like chooses men or blah 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 because I have had people come and say things and it's on YouTube. I'm hearing one side of the story. And sometimes I would say things like, "Well, if I asked your husband, what would he say about this?" Right? And people are like, "Oh my God." Like it's like in the Western world, we've made it a crime to like question men, like question women. But there's two people in a marriage. And we know evolutionarily that women are agreeable and they're highly influenceable, especially by other women. And we also know evolutionarily that women are very conniving and cunning in how they manipulate. So let me share this little bit. So this is like this mind blowing, the research around this. Evolutionarily speaking, tribal loyalty was very important. Very, very, very important. So if a woman in the tribe said about her best friend, "Oh, she's a whore," she's a bad mom. They might think that she is, but they might also question that woman because they're going to be like, well, you're not very loyal. That's your friend. If you're outing your friend, who else are you going to out? Are you a really loyal member? So what happened is that women evolved to be cunning in very subtle ways. So how we evolved is that that same woman who wants to break apart her friend's marriage is going to justify it as social justice. By the way, this is like heavily studied. It's fascinating. She's going to come and she's going to be like, I'm really worried about Sally's children. Now the tribe is not going to question her. They're going to say, why are you worried about Sally's children? Well, Sally's been sleeping around a lot and I'm just so worried about her children. Like this could have a really bad influence on the whole tribe. What she's actually trying to do is say bad things about Sally, break apart her marriage, get her kicked out of the tribe because she's jealous of Sally. So how you see this these days is showing up and saying things like, oh, I can't believe your husband buys you flowers. Like that's bad for the environment. You fly first class, that's bad. They don't give a fucking damn about the environment or the flowers or Sally's children. But we have evolved to have these subtle ways of manipulating each other. So you have to be careful. You have to really guard your marriage. One of the reasons that I'm not a big fan of sleeping with men or with sleeping around hookup culture is because in my culture, there's this thing, and I think this is so beautiful. They say that when a man, like a husband and a wife are intimate together, the angels show up. And the angels have these, how do I translate this into English? They have these like royal, like divine fabric that they put as a guard around the union. So when you are in a private, intimate moment with your husband, angels are protecting and guiding you from evil forces and like other entities seeing that. But you know who shows up when you're sleeping with someone without the union of God present? The devil shows up. Evil forces show up. I believe that this goes beyond sex. So if God is not present in your union, then women coming and whispering to you saying, hey, your husband was checking out that woman, or I heard this about this, or I heard your mother-in-law was saying this. Oh my God, you're not going to believe this story. um, so someone in my family was telling me this story. Her daughter had two children back to back, my family member. And her daughter, is successful, has her own business. And right after she had these two babies back to back, she got into an accident and she needed support. So my family member moved her daughter in with her and got some help, a nanny. Well, the nanny that came in didn't speak English, and she thought that my family member was the mother-in-law and not the mother. And this woman proceeded, she was jealous of her daughter, and she started saying things like, I want to wear what your daughter, like, I want to wear what she wears, I want to eat what she eats. And then she started, because she thought it was the mother-in-law and not the mother, she started pitting them, trying to pit them against each other. And by the time they figured it out, they thought it was funny, but also dangerous, right? Because she was starting to get jealous that, like, this woman has this fabulous life. She's got money, she's got a nice house, she's got a loving husband, she's got these beautiful babies, and now she has help. And she's like, I want her wardrobe, I want to eat what she's eating. And what I was talking to my relative about, I'm like, oh my God, what if you were the mother-in-law? She's like, I didn't even think about that. I'm like, could you imagine if you really were the mother-in-law and she didn't know you, and this woman would have walked in and destroyed your entire house, but because it was your daughter, she thought it was funny because she knows you. So I'm being the age that I am, being that I deal with a lot of people, being that I have people sharing personal stories of their lives and their marriages. Have God in your union. Yes, there's really amazing people out there, but I would rather have an intelligent enemy than a stupid friend. This is a saying in my culture, by the way. They say that It's better to have an intelligent enemy than a stupid friend, because a stupid friend that's jealous of you and not like aware of it can completely has access to your inner world, can completely try to destroy your union. This is why the couple bubble is so important, because Irfan and I have done inner work. It doesn't matter what his family says, what my family says, what friends say. We always come together and fact check. We always say, "Hey, what's happening here? Like, what is this person trying to do? Why? What, is there funny business over here?" So this is what it takes to have a robust marriage. They've done studies on women, female relationships, where the women are not even aware that they're sabotaging another woman, but they see them as competition. They see them as similar or more higher mate value. I've talked about this recently in I think in the money grid I was talking about some of these studies. So just God needs to be present. Keep the focus on your union. Be careful the advice that you take. Even my advice, filter it through your own lens, filter it through God, fact check it within your own energetic system. I taught you how to do this in my book, because I'm teaching you this so that you not only fact check energetically, truth test the world, you can even truth test myself. If what I'm saying that particular advice doesn't resonate with you, don't take it, because you know you. You know you. God knows you. You know your specific situation. I'm some lady on YouTube giving very general advice to a whole bunch of people that might be from different socioeconomic backgrounds, different cultures, different religions. I don't know how this advice is going to translate into the different perceptions, right? But you know you, right? You can drop in, you can truth test, and you can say, okay, is this going to help my marriage? Is this going to help my life? Can I play with this? Can I test it out? And if yes, use it. If you're like, nope, this doesn't resonate with me, drop it. Maybe that particular bit wasn't for you. Maybe it was for someone else, right? We need to, I think this is so important in our education, that we learn to uh, have discernment, right? There's so many things that I learned. Some of it I love and I use right away. Some of it I'm like, I don't think they're talking to me. I don't think I'm their target audience, right? That's okay. That doesn't mean they're wrong. It just means I'm not their target audience for that thing. Yeah? This just unlocked something huge for me. Thank you so much. You are so welcome, Lena. Nina, I'm so happy to hear that. Yes, it's like demons talking to you through them, trying to spiritually manipulate your relationship. Protection prayers all day. Yes, I feel like the devil is attacking families right now, and it's showing up and manifesting in the field as all kinds of things. It's like it's almost like our systems, our societies don't even promote happy family unity and health. So we have to be a little bit more guarding of what we do have, right? So we want to make sure that, like, I'm so blessed. Oh my God, so blessed that I'm surrounded by happy, thriving couples in my neighborhood, in Irfan's family, in my family, in our friend circles that have been married for decades. Like they've done inner work together. Like they get it. So I'm blessed that I have someone that if I'm like, hey, what do you think of this? What do you think of this? Like, for example, there was one thing just last week. I had a question about my middle son, and I shared it with my sister-in-law, and she's like, "Oh, that's so normal. Like my son did that, and then and then he did that." It's like it seems like your middle one is a little bit more creative. Like, Armand was a little bit more. He gets to be his own person. So I have people in my life, thankfully, that I can run things by. But imagine if I had said the same thing to a jealous friend or an unhappy person, and maybe they had good intention. They'd be like, well, that's weird. Like, how come Armand did that and Ayan can't do that? Like, they would have now put doubt in my mind, right? Like, do you see what I'm saying? So we want to make sure that we're going to people who have lived life, who have health in their self, who are well, who have healthy relationships, who have, who have the kind of unions and lives that we want. Of course, not everything. There's no one on this planet that I would trade places with, because I love my own life very much. But the people that I go to are people that have healthy lifestyles themselves, right? They have healthy marriages. They've been through stuff in their life. They've done inner work. And so they give me a very healthy perspective. And I'm like, oh, that's another way of thinking about that. I like that. I swear, like even at my sister-in-law's house last week, I think I got like millions of dollars of mentoring for free. They were able to just like I was able to run so many things. I heard like their story of how they started their business and the things they went through and how they evolved and what they learned as a couple. Uh, it was just so beautiful. So surround yourself with people that have that lifestyle and have been through some stuff because they've evolved through it, and people that will give you a healthy perspective. uh, Anytime that you go to someone and they're like, "Oh, he's evil, he's bad, leave him," that's not a healthy perspective. Now, he might be evil. Like maybe you're one of the rare ones that ended up with a predator. But even then, healthy people are a little bit more gentle in their approach. They still might be like, "Well, tell me a little bit more," and, "Oh, that's not right. That doesn't sound right." Right? There's still gonna be this level of balance and level-headedness in how they approach your situation. They're not gonna destroy your situation and egg you on when you might be having a moment. Everyone has a moment, you know? You might be on your period. You might have had a bad argument. You might make up the next day, but now they remember, and they now have this thing that they can like poke holes in your marriage. Yeah. Please talk about these topics more, Mina, female friendships. I will. Oh my God, that's been one that's like been nagging at me, and I did it privately in my courses. I thought it was going to trigger a lot of women, maybe, but maybe if I approach it from a very scientific point and just share the science, then maybe it'll trigger. Everything I say triggers some people, but maybe it'll trigger less people. So I'll make that a note. Female friendships. We could talk about it from an evolutionary perspective and how to work with that. I'll be honest with you. I have friends right now, some of my friends that do get jealous, not just of me, but I see them getting jealous of their other friends. And at my level where I'm at, I can still be friends with them and kind of work with it and not let it affect my life. But 10 years ago, Mina, I couldn't have had them in my life. They would have destroyed my life. I now have energetic authority to see it, have empathy for it, and not entangle with it. Does that make sense? 10 years ago, I would have taken their advice or their thing and fought with my husband or yelled at my kids. And they want it. That's exactly what they thrive on. But I now see, okay, well, these people haven't done this level of inner work, and I'm still okay with having them somewhat in my life. They're not in my inner circle, God no. They're somewhat in my life, but I'm not taking advice from them. I'm not like taking anything they say seriously. In fact, I notice when they're like they often talk about their other friends, and the way they do it is that like, "Oh, we're doing this to like save the environment," or "We're talking about them because you don't give a damn about the environment. You don't care about other people. You just want me to know shit about your friend because you're jealous of her." Like, that's the truth, right? It's the scientific fact. But I can deal with that because I do have that energetic authority now. Someone who's newlywed, you need to keep those people far away from you. That's what I was telling my nephew. I was like, "Listen, okay, right now, you guys are engaged. You're getting married this year. Those first 2 years, you need to be very careful who has ears and eyes on you. Because if there's people whispering on her ear or your ear, they're piercing your couple bubble before it's formed. It's like taking out the root of something, a plant, to keep looking at it, to keep messing with it before it's taken root. I'm like, the first 2 years, it should be all about you and your couple bubble. In fact, even the families, they should offer support, but they should back away for the first 2 years. In fact, some of you guys were asking me to do videos on engagements because you know how some people can get a boyfriend, but they can't get engaged? Well, some people can get engaged, but they can't make it to the altar. Some people can get it to the altar, but they can't make it past the honeymoon stage. Some people can, you know what I mean? There's always limitations. We need to talk about engagements, and we need to talk about why some people, no matter how much you help them, and they use all the principles, they get the engagement, they can't make it to the day thing because that's their container now and they can't expand it. So I'm going to give you guys some tips on how to actually get married. We don't just want the ring, we want the forever marriage too. So that's on my list as well. I'm adding it to my list. Don't worry, I got you. Okay, ladies. I know I promised a Q&A. I will be back, I promise. I'm gonna leave this here. This was a lot. It was too much. My throat is dry. I need to go eat something. I love you. Okay, $1,000,000 Man, 50% off. Highly recommended. Irfan taught half of it. I taught half of it. The way we did it is he taught a session, I taught a session. He taught a session, I taught a session. And at the end, we shared a very sexy, it felt very vulnerable, um, very intimate practice that we do together at nighttime. And I was like very hesitant about sharing that in that course, but I knew that it would help you guys, so I did. So we filmed this very intimate, sexy practice that we do together that he leads. And so we did it that way. We taught it to you guys so that your man can lead that and you can get some nighttime juiciness going. This practice is meant to help you gain trust and form a pair bonding and an emotional connection, but it often leads to more. So that's why I felt kind of vulnerable. And like usually I do it in my 90s, so like it was really weird because I was like, okay, let me just put a robe on because it felt really intimate. So that's also in the Million Dollar Man. I'm feeling kind of embarrassed even telling you guys about it, but that's in there. I love you. I'll see you in the next one.